Hello everyone, another video here on the channel. For those who aren't subscribed yet, please subscribe. Leave a like if you enjoy the content. Feel free to comment, share, and for those who want and are able to contribute a small monthly amount to the channel, just click or tap the button. Become a member. Today we're going to talk about why women have an irresistible, magnetic, and extremely powerful attraction to bad boys, the so-called kapha hestus. This is a topic that really mixes together some biological impulses and instincts with environmental stimuli and rewards, which is more the focus of my channel. So yes, the culture is gynocentric, and there's the issue of feminism and other nuances. That's what encourages women to have this kind of behavior and see men more average, nice guys as boring, and to value the bad boys. The cultural aspect is extremely powerful. However, biology also plays a role. I've already said here on the channel several times that when you analyze anthropological, mental, psychological, cultural, or social problems, you always have to look at it like a well-divided pie chart with several slices. Each one has its own considerable slice. Because trying to explain everything from just one perspective, as if there's only one cause, that's not how you really understand things. And even when you try to explain and map out different behaviors and causes, a lot of times you still won't be able to map out the whole picture. But by doing that, you get a little closer to understanding the problem at hand. There are several theories out there, and I think they're all very valid. That's a strong example of how hard it is to explain this with just one. On one hand, just looking at one side of the coin, it shows that the player, because of the fact that and especially if the player, he's the kind of guy who attracts a lot of beautiful women, because there are also players who attract women who are less attractive, and then he'll be successful in those circles among women who are also less attractive. But here, let's specifically talk about the players who attract women of a higher level. Not every player is rich. Even though in Brazil it's often associated with money, there are also natural chads, natural players, who are usually good-looking guys, chads, who are able to attract women and know how to make women aware that they attract a lot of women, because there's no point in being an anonymous player. So that guy who gets talked about a lot, who has a certain reputation, the more famous he is, the more women want him. Yeah, it's the opposite for women, right? The more of a reputation a woman has for getting around, the less men want her for a relationship. No matter how beautiful she is or anything, guys will only want something casual with her. Because that kind of woman, men don't value for a relationship. It's something natural and biological. That's a topic for another video. It has nothing to do with sexism or social constructs. Let's make that very clear. That's just how it is, right? It's something very natural and, in this case, even civilizational. But for women, it's different. Women actually value men who have access to lots of other women. Miguel from Attitude Alpha explains this really well on his channel. I've made some comments about it too. Other channels also explain, brilliantly, the role of the bad boy in society. If you pay attention, in recent years, this whole bad boy thing has how it's developed in the social media environment, like I talk about a lot here on the channel, especially Instagram. Women end up seeing photos of certain guys who stand out, with lots of women commenting, lots of beautiful women liking their posts. And it just goes on from there. There's also all the gossip that happens when they get together in their own groups. And just to point out, men are also extremely gossipy. In fact, I think when it comes to relationships and when it comes to sexual gossip, men are worse than women. I've said this on several channels, so no woman can come here and say otherwise. Say that we don't talk about men's behavior and all that. I've said in at least 10 videos here that men are extremely gossipy. There's no such thing as keeping it quiet. If a guy hooks up with someone and doesn't tell anyone, it's because the woman isn't attractive. If the guy gets with a girl who's average or good looking, if she's really hot, then he'll go around telling everyone, because men gossip about this stuff. Like I said, we've talked about this here plenty of times, but women end up finding out anyway. So who are the players? It's really hard for there to be a hidden player, because this kind of gossip always gets around, whether it's through women or men. Both the biological aspect of players and the way they're extremely skilled at confusing women with mixed signals, sometimes acting romantic, other times more detached, that hot and cold variability, all of that mental confusion gives women the impression that they're dealing with a man who's powerful mentally, not necessarily powerful in a material, political, or even social status sense, but specifically in the mental sense. And one of the things for women, this is where a bit of that mix between culture and biology comes in. Culturally, through movies, TV shows like those on Globo, and so on, the player is really glorified. These are men who are extremely unpredictable, which triggers that stimulus that stirs a woman's biological instincts, which is the desire to have intelligent, sharp offspring. A woman doesn't just want to have extremely beautiful offspring in terms of physical beauty and health, and so on. She also wants to have intelligent and sharp children. And as much as some people might say, but what's so smart about that? Nature itself is amoral. So, like, it's only recently in terms of why is it so important to understand that nature is brutal and cruel? It's not just brutal and cruel on TV shows. It's on Discovery Net, Wild, actually, Animal Planet, Discovery Channel, that Nat Geo Wild. Those channels that show lions hunting deer and snakes attacking rats and so on. There, everyone says, yeah, nature is relentless, nature is cruel, but they think humans are excluded from that. They're not. Humans aren't excluded from that. So, this whole thing about wisdom, about intelligence, the arts, music, literature, those things have only existed for a short time in humanity compared to how long humans have been on Earth. If you consider from Neanderthals, Australopithecus, and other species before Homo sapiens, even. So, like I was saying, let's take Homer's works the Iliad, the Odyssey. How old are those? 10,000 years? Not even that, you know? So, it's really not that long ago. I know it's not exactly the very first work of Western civilization, but it's one of the first. So, let's take that as one of the earliest ones. If you try to measure this on a chronological scale, you see how little time there actually is of organization of what we call literature, of what will be considered high culture, and so on. So, like I was saying, this kind of behavior, yeah, for example, this kind of behavior, confusing a woman with a game, compared to what someone like Aristotle has to teach, is something extremely low, extremely childish. That's why so many people resent jerks, because they actually contribute very little when it comes to the evolution of society in civilizational terms, and they're right about that. I've seen some videos out there that really criticize jerks from this perspective. But there's no point in trying to fight against nature, because the period during which this kind of behavior is considered dumb and stupid is very short compared to the time when women have always been looking for the alpha male, the strongest man, or at least what was considered evolved at the time, which was physical strength, intelligence, and material resources. So the jerk ends up, even if it's just a kind of imitation, managing to convey that to the woman. So the woman oftentimes, she'll feel really attracted to a jerk and will ignore, for example, a guy who's actually successful. But sometimes he doesn't get much attention, like someone who's successful in the field of information technology, for example. Or a great writer, for example, who doesn't have a very nice body or who looks more like a nerd. A woman won't find that kind of man all that appealing. Well, she might find him somewhat appealing, but mostly as someone to have her kids with and to try to get resources from him. But when it comes to making a woman lose control, get extremely turned on and all that, that's not going to happen with this kind of man. It happens with the bad boys, because bad boys, even though their behavior is something that culturally many people even consider despicable, they trigger that instinct in women. So that's the biological part behind all this. The woman sees him as someone who can he has a strong power of persuasion, someone who comes across as intelligent, even if that intelligence isn't necessarily seen as a good thing in today's culture. Even though humanity has evolved and built a huge intellectual and theoretical foundation behind all this kind of thing still ends up being valued. So, in this regard, nature is relentless because even in countries like Sweden, Singapore, Switzerland, Hong Kong, Japan, where there's a high level of intellectualism, you still see women losing their footing and having a huge admiration for bad boys. So don't think this only happens in Latin countries or in the third world, where there's a lot of social inequality. where women are extremely hypergamous, because this happens all over the world, okay? From Switzerland to Japan and Brazil, Colombia, Mexico, Australia. I've even had subscribers here on my channel comment that even Chinese women who live, subscribers of mine, who live in Australia, where there are a lot of Chinese people, a lot of Sri Lankans too, and so on, and Indians as well, you know? And people from other countries, folks from Singapore too. Well, Sri Lankans would be, they're actually from Sri Lanka, not Singapore, but there are also a lot of them in Australia. So, from Indonesia and so on, from Southeast Asia in large numbers. Even these peoples who don't have that kind of culture, a funk music, a flaunting wealth, and soap operas that glorify the jerk, like in a country such as China. I've already had subscribers here on my channel from Australia commenting that Chinese women dream about and are crazy for the tanned bad boy surfer types from Australia. So this is happening all over the world. It's not just in peripheral countries that are extremely hypergamous and unequal. Now, so as we get to the final stretch of the video, pay close attention to this behavior women have toward bad boys and how they really get paralyzed by these guys for a variety of reasons. Cultural, biological, physical attraction, really. Because honestly, a lot of these guys are good looking, so there's a natural physical attraction as well. And this ties in a bit with what I said in that video about not being the consolation prize. No man should accept being the consolation prize, because women really do end up wanting these guys as the prize. These guys are rarely catchable. They hardly ever settle down. A lot of them are polygamous. Some do get caught, and others end up getting screwed over too. It's that old story. Some alphas end up turning into alfalfas, just like the legend Dom Sandro always says. Sometimes these guys slip up, end up having a kid, and then get screwed over in court. They wind up with a lot of trouble, getting into bad marriages. I know a lot of players out there, and a lot of you listening will relate too. Guys from the 80s, back in the pre-smartphone days, when everything was done by SMS, when there was no Instagram, none of that. No Facebook, nothing yet. These guys would go out clubbing and hook up with a bunch of women, and so on. And today, a lot of those guys, I'm actually going to make a whole video just about this. The extinction of the Pezivasa in society. How did that whole thing end? Guys who used to go out to party, to dance, and to pick up women? And how a lot of those guys back in the early 2000s up until 2010, 2012 ended up getting snagged by average wives. Now they're living like dogs. But anyway, jerks have always existed and always will, whether it's in the analog era, the desktop era, or the smartphone era. There will always be some guys out there who mess with women's heads, who get talked about for being with lots of women, and women really want to be the one to tame these guys. I'm also going to make a video just about this desire women have, taming the bad boy. But for now, that's it. So this is a more laid-back introductory video about why women want them so much. The bad boys and the specific and additional nuances of this video will be discussed in future videos, alright? And just 2 corrections before I wrap up the video. I'm editing here, adding this part at the end, because I don't like editing the middle of the video for 2 reasons. First, I'm kinda clueless when it comes to editing, and I'm afraid I'll mess up what I've already recorded. And secondly, I think it loses a bit of its naturalness. 2 mistakes I made during the video. One was a bizarre mistake there, in Portuguese, that I ended up saying quickly. I said lions hunting. Lions hunting? No, lions hunting. Servants and non-servants. Lions hunting them? That was in the heat of the moment. I have a habit of speaking a little fast. And the other mistake was, I meant to say one thing and ended up saying it in a way that was really confusing and made it sound like I was giving the wrong information. The thing about Homer's works, the Iliad and the Odyssey, they're from about 2,800 years ago. What I meant was that there hasn't even been 10,000 years of this kind of civilizational organization in terms of cultures. Actually, it's much less than that. So just to clarify and correct myself here, it's not that Homer's works are from 10,000 years ago. They're not. They're estimated to be from the 8th century BC, so about 2,800 years ago. So what I meant was that there hasn't even been 10,000 years of intellectual, cultural, and civilizational organization, not that Homer's works are that old. So 2 corrections here. One about the chronology, and the other about verb and grammatical agreement. Really. Alright, a big hug to everyone.